where did you grow up in Juneau?
On what was called the Mud Flats. It is now Egan Drive, part where our house was. And during the renovation of the area, my mother had to sell the property, so we moved up to 10th Street. And then from 10th Street, we've moved to 11th and C Street. So it's been 2 blocks each time, which would be easier to move across country. We came up in 1940.
Okay.
My mother and father worked for Governor Greening and Mrs. Greening. And before there was voted for a governor, he was appointed by Roosevelt. And my family had known him back in New Hampshire before he became governor. We came originally from Massachusetts.
Okay.
I was born in Washington, D.C., but my family traveled all over the United States quite a bit. We came up for 1 year, and at the end of the year, I was ready to leave. And that was when the war broke out, Second World War. And it's been 74 years now. I said, Dad, you promised. And he said, oh, 1 more year. My dad worked on several jobs. He liked to travel. He never liked to stay in one spot too long. And he worked on the Alcan. He fished with my husband. There was 1 policeman and 1 chief of police. If there was a fire, there were so many whistles or sounds made on the telegraph poles, and you knew if it was 3-1 what district the fire was at. Oh. And all the volunteer firemen would run to that place to put the fire out. And they had a big party at Christmas time. Everybody was invited. The state office buildings are what used to be the federal building. And I was married and working in the what we call the new federal building from 1966.
Okay.
We were one of the first offices to move in there, Fish and Wildlife Service. I was an accountant there. I think I worked for them for 15 years. I worked for the Coast Guard for 17 years. I worked for the Forest Service, Department of Energy. I think that was it. Oh, and 1 year I worked for the state. I went to the parochial school here in Juneau, 4th through 8th grade. And then we had to take tests from the parochial school before we could go into high school, which was the public school. We did not have a high school in the parochial school. And I went to 4 years and graduated from high school. I'm one of the first members of my family to graduate from high school. In the old days, people didn't have to graduate if they could do the work. They went to work if they were 14 years of age. So I had to, because at that time Juneau was very poor. When I got married, my husband was a commercial fisherman, and he said, well, at least we'll always eat because I can catch fish. He was a troller.
He's a troller? Okay.
Mm-hmm. He considered that the king of the fishermen. He wanted first class prices for the fish, too, always. And we enjoyed fishing the first 4 years we were married. By that time I had 2 children.
Oh.
And we decided it was more economical if we all went fishing and lived on the boat for the summer. He took me out on the ocean 1 year, and the mosquitoes were so bad, and having 2 children, we were practically eaten alive by them, and the water was so rough. I said, I think we better go inside waters. And I think he kind of agreed.
My dad grew up here in town. Mom was Alice Kendall. And Dick Kendall was a fisherman too, and that's why I was like, oh, okay. I wonder if you knew him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, even better.
Old time Juneau family. In those days, it seemed like everybody was related to everybody else because before that, if a spouse died, there was always someone else that was willing to take on a family and a new wife or new husband. So. And everybody lived more or less close to each other, too. My mother thought it was terrible when we moved from on the flats up to 10th Street because she was from the old country and families lived next to each other for generations.
So does your mother? She stuck around town too once you were old, and moved out of the house and lived on your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
She worked at the governor's mansion through, I think it was 6 governors.
Wow.
And Governor Greening wrote in his book that if it hadn't been for our French cook, which my mother didn't like to be called a French cook, she was from Luxembourg, and he said if it hadn't been for Marguerite, I don't think our dinners would have gotten off to as good a entertainment or passed as many bills if it hadn't been for her good food all the time. And Bob Bartlett had said at that time, Pearl Mesta was the ambassador to Luxembourg. And he said, Marguerite Doucet is the Alaska's ambassador because of her cooking. That she was the Pearl Mesta of Alaska. So I have seen a lot of changes. There were approximately 3,000 people. That was people that stayed here year-round. Now I think there's over 30,000. So it's changed.